What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the workshop. I hope you're all doing well. Now, it's come about time for me to resurface my workbench. So I have a lot of elbow grease and a bit of hard work to reflatten this and just get it back to a good working condition. So what I thought I'd do in this video is tell you a little bit about this workbench, answer some questions, and basically just go through how this has held up and how it has worked for me over the last 5 years, what I like about it and what I don't like about it, and what I'm planning on changing when I eventually rebuild a woodworking bench. So let's jump in and do it. Okay, let's start. Let's take a look at this workbench. Now, what is it? Well, basically, this is the Paul Sellers designed workbench. Now, I'll link to the video that I watched to make this, or the video series that I watched to make this of Paul's, in the description below if you guys want to check it out and see how to build this bench for yourself. I won't get into that in this video, I'll just give you a brief overview. So, it's a 2x4 construction, so it's relatively inexpensive. So the pros to this bench is it's very cost effective, it's easy to make, and it's very, very sturdy and very, very strong. There are 3 great things I like about this bench. Now, there's a couple of things you need to consider, and as I found out, using 2x4 or 4x2 construction lumber, although it is cost effective, construction lumber is not very stable. So it hasn't been well seasoned. So that's one thing you'll have to pay attention to. So I recommend if you're going to do this and build this bench, get your construction lumber, get it into your workshop for a number of months before you go ahead and make it, because it will move, it will twist, it will cup, it will do all that stuff. And I've had to reflatten this bench a number of times. So that's the first point I'll make to you if you're going to build yourself a 2x4 construction workbench. Now, having said that, for a workbench that's essentially made from white deal construction lumber, it has held up exceptionally well over the last 5 years. It's taken a hell of a lot of abuse and the surface on it is still pretty good. So if you're intending on making your workbench out of some softwoods, don't panic. It will hold up, it will last a very long time. You might just have to resurface it a little more often than you would if you made it from hardwood. So as construction material for a woodworking bench, it's cheap, like I said already, cost effective in other words, and it will hold up, and I've no doubt that this bench could last another 20 years, no problem, as long as it's resurfaced every now and again. Now, let's get into the design of this, what I like and what I don't like. Okay, so one thing I really like about the design of this workbench is the tool well. I find it extremely handy. I know some people don't like a tool well, but for me, this has worked out really well. I really like it, and it's something that I will definitely incorporate into my next workbench build. So it's just so handy to leave your holdfasts or marking or measuring equipment down inside it, and you can still throw your workpiece fully supported across the bench. Even larger boards, you can work on them and leave your tools down and out of the way. It doesn't gather dust and it doesn't gather dirt. I don't find that at all, and I find it extremely handy. And another nice thing for all the people that worry about leaving their bench planes face down, well, you can just leave it across your tool well like that and the blade is not making contact with anything. So it's a nice little way of just leaving your hand plane down like that. You're not leaving it on its side, where you can risk knocking the blade off square every time you leave it down like that, even though leaving your bench plane down on a bench like that is not really going to damage the blade. After all, that is made of wood, that's designed to cut wood. It's not that big a deal, believe you me. But if you are worried about that, you can leave your hand plane across your tool well and that blade is not in contact with anything. So tool well, definitely yes. Now, another thing I like about this bench is the apron. Now notice I said apron and not aprons. We'll get into that now in a second. So definitely if I was to rebuild a workbench, I would have an apron on one side. It's great for working with longer pieces. You can just put holdfasts in it. It's a nice, simple solution. You're not using sliding dead men and all that kind of stuff. You can keep the build nice and simple. And that's the whole plus point of Paul Sellers' bench. It's very easy to build and very easy to construct. So definitely the apron on this side at least is a very good advantage. So just to recap the pros that I found over the last few years of working on this bench. Again, like I've said already, it's cheap to make, it's easy to make, it's strong and it's sturdy. I really like the tool well. I love the apron on that side. All that is great. Now, there's a few issues with this bench that are not so great and that I want to kind of upgrade in my next bench. So when Paul Sellers designed this, he only used a face vise on one side, no dog holes or anything like that. He doesn't like dog holes in his bench, if I remember correctly from watching the build series. However, for me, that's where this bench falls down. There's just not enough ways of holding work to this bench, especially kind of doing intricate work. So a good woodworking bench, you have to be able to work on the face of a board. So you need to be able to clamp your board to the top of your bench. You have to be able to work on the side of the board. So just like this, you need to be able to clamp your board to the side of the bench, and you need to be able to work on the end of a board. So you need to be able to use this bench to clamp pieces to it, to do dovetails and all that kind of work. So that's where this bench is missing most of its things, and that's what I have added. So let me just go through what I've had added, and I'll tell you what I'm going to incorporate into my next build. Okay, so one of the things I've added to this bench is a wagon / tail voice, and that's not in the original Paul Sellers design. Now, to me, this is an essential bit of kit, especially with a dog hold system, when it comes to clamping work to the top of your bench so you can work on its face. It has been invaluable to me, and it's definitely something that I will incorporate into any future workbench build. Now, this particular one is made from a leg voice kit. I have a full video on it. It's a nice cost-effective way of installing a tail / wagon voice into your workbench. So that's an essential bit of kit for me. So definitely some kind of dog hold system with a tail voice is going to be included in the next bench. Now, one of the problems I had with this bench, like I said, if you guys remember, I said apron, not aprons. This particular apron has always bothered me. It's always kind of been in the way, especially when it comes to clamping work to your bench. When you're trying to get multiple clamps onto something, when you're doing some detail work, maybe using pairing blocks or the like, then this apron is always in the way, and it's a right nightmare. So I would definitely have an apron on this side and no apron on this side. So that would be something that I would remove from this particular design. Now, another thing that I will not be incorporating into any future workbench build are these quick release woodworking voices. They're a good solid voice, but I just don't get on with them, and I just don't like using them. All the mechanism for these voices are in the bottom of it, which means you can't drop long wide boards through them, so that's a bit of a nuisance. If you want to clamp a long board, you have to try and kind of catch it on its side like this, which means you have to put something similar width in this side of the voice so you get enough clamping pressure on this side of the voice, and it's just a bit of a pain. I don't really like them, so I'm not going to incorporate them into any future workbench build. However, there are different style face voices on the market that use different screw options and things like that. Maybe something like that, maybe something like the Veritas one where you have full access down through it. I might incorporate it, but really they're not necessary if you have a Moxon voice, and I much prefer using this Moxon voice for the simple reason it's removable. I can put it out of the way. It's very quick and easy to set up. A couple of holdfasts, it holds it to the bench, and you can drop long boards straight down through it because there's 2 screws either side. You have all this space. So the Moxon voice with a workbench is an ideal setup. That's my personal experience. So definitely a tail voice, definitely a Moxon voice, not one of these quick release woodworking voices. Another thing that I have added to this bench is a leg voice, an essential bit of kit when using it with the apron for clamping long boards and doing other style work. It does plenty of power in a leg voice. This particular one I kind of invented. It's the cam lock leg voice. So you can pull it out, put your board in, clamp it in, and lock it with the cam, and you get a ton of clamping pressure. So whatever design you'd go for, whether it's a bench crafted one, it's a screw type one, whatever, I think a leg voice is essential, and I would definitely install one of these on my next workbench. So after 5 years of use or thereabouts, I can report that a 2x4 workbench is good and solid and has held up extremely well. So my experience of using this bench, the few pros and cons that I like about it, again, tool well, yes. Apron on this side, yes. Apron on that side, no. Definitely a tail / wagon voice, definitely a dog hold system, definitely a leg voice. Not using any of those quick release woodworking voices, don't like them. Definitely a Moxon voice. And yeah, how the frame and stuff goes together, that's up for debate. I haven't any strong opinions on that. So definitely when I take the apron off that side, it's going to affect how this bench would go together. So I have to change that design slightly. But other than that, I'm happy to report that, yeah, you can build yourself a good woodworking workbench from 2x4 construction lumber. Just be aware that it will twist, move, and you will have to re-flatten it every now and again, which is what I'm going to get on and do now. The only problem that I have flattening this bench is they're so full of knots. Another problem with construction lumber, that it really does give your hand plane a very hard time. So it's time for some blood, sweat and tears now as I try and flatten this side of the bench. I'm not going to do this side, I'm just going to do this side because that's the side I use the most. So let's crack on. Actually, before I crack on and flatten this top, one thing I should point out is that I added a shelf underneath this workbench. So something definitely to consider if you're going to build yourself a woodworking bench is storage underneath. I mean, there's a whole pile of space underneath here, and storage in your workshop is essential. So some sort of system. Again, it's just a simple shelf is all I have down here. It's not part of the actual frame of the bench itself. It's not needed. The aprons are what hold this bench together, so this is just screwed in place. It's a good place to store all your jigs and stuff. So definitely in a future build I will incorporate some sort of drawer and shelf system underneath, because like I said, this is a whole pile of space that's going to waste, and definitely have some sort of storage under your workbench. Okay, so I'm going to crack on and start flattening this bench now. So I have a razor sharp blade in my 5.5, in my number 5, and in my low angle jack plane as well. So all my jack planes are sharpened up, ready to go. This bench is very abusive on blades because of those knots. It's a real issue. Now, a power plane would probably be the way to go. I don't have a power plane, and I'm going to do this by hand because I get a better finish anyway. So it's just a bit of elbow grease. I have a full video on flattening this workbench and how I did it before, so I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to flatten this and I'll show you the finished results. Again, it's just a lot of elbow grease and a few swear words along the way. Hit a few knots and basically just get through it. Okay guys, there we go. That is a nice flat work area on top of this workbench now, and you don't need the gym when you're reflattening your workbench by hand, believe you me. So that's good and flat now and perfect in the area where I do most of my woodworking. So a little coat of boiled linseed oil on this and it shall be good to go again. So that's it guys, just a quick video about my workbench. I have been getting a lot of questions lately and emails and stuff, so I decided to do a video on it as I'm flattening the top, just to get you guys know the pros and cons and how this bench has served me over the last 5 years. Now remember, this is just my opinion and my experience. Yours may be different. You might like different voices to what I like. You might like a different setup. You mightn't like it too well. That's all good. It's whatever works for you at the end of the day. And when it comes to building a workbench, if you're new to woodworking, you're looking to get yourself a good quality workbench, then I highly recommend this, the Paul Sellers workbench. Other than a few work holding issues, it's a really solid, easy to make bench. Again, I'll have that link, that video linked below. You guys can go check it out. And Paul is a fantastic woodworker. He's a lifetime of experience. So definitely listen to what that guy has to say. So yeah, that's it guys. I'm going to get out of here now. Thanks to everybody over on Patreon who continue to support the channel. That's very much appreciated guys. And comments and questions below. Let me know what you think and what you would add or take away from your particular bench. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. And if you're new here, think about subscribing. So that's it. I'm going to get out of here now. I'm going to have a drink because yeah, I'm a bit tired after flattening this top.